It's strange, isn't it, how someone can mean everything to you one moment, and then, in a single decision, they become a stranger, the messages stop, the phone stops ringing, the promises dissolve into silence. And you're left wondering what it was all for. That's heartbreak, but let me tell you something. This heartbreak, this moment that feels like your end, might just be the beginning of your greatest transformation. You loved fully, completely, without hesitation, without guarantees, without a fallback plan, and that takes more courage than most people ever acknowledge. We often hear that love should be measured, cautious, smart, strategic even. But you didn't hold back, did you? You went all in. You let your guard down. You didn't love halfway. You didn't ration your emotions like they were some kind of limited currency. You gave. You trusted. You invested pieces of yourself in someone who once made you feel seen, valued, maybe even irreplaceable, and now it hurts. Because somehow, despite all of that, they walked away, or worse, they stayed without staying. They drifted while you clung. They pulled back while you leaned in. They turned quiet while your heart screamed for connection. And yet, in all of that messin', the confusion and pain, you might be telling yourself a damaging story. One that whispers you were too much, too available, too emotional, too eager, you should have played harder to get, you should have been colder, less involved, but stop, just stop for a second and take a deep breath. Because that story, it's not the truth, it's your hurt talking, your fear trying to shield you from the same pain happening again. But what if I told you that your full-hearted love wasn't your downfall, but your proof of strength? Think about it, in a world that constantly tells us to be less attached, less emotional, less open. You chose to be more invested, more honest, more present. Do you have any idea how rare that is? Most people are walking around guarding their hearts like castles. They build walls so high, no one ever gets in. And ironically, they're still lonely inside, but not you. You didn't pretend not to care. You weren't too proud to show affection. You weren't obsessed with the games. You loved, and that love came from a place inside you that is real, unfiltered, and deeply human. And now that it's over or falling apart, you feel exposed. Vulnerable, like you handed over something sacred and it wasn't protected. Maybe you feel like a fool, like you were naive, but pause, look deeper. You didn't lose, you didn't fail, you didn't get played. You were just real, and sometimes being real in a fake world hurts like hell. But it also means you're not hollow, you're not hiding, you're not living behind a mask. The fact that you feel this pain is proof that you were brave enough to care. You weren't trying to impress someone by being detached. You weren't too cool to call. You weren't ghosting them to get their attention. You were there, consistently, intentionally, wholeheartedly. And that matters. That counts for something, even if they couldn't see the value in it. Maybe you forgave them too many times. Maybe you stayed longer than you should have. Maybe you convinced yourself that if I just love them harder, they'll understand. And now, with all the hindsight in the world, it's easy to beat yourself up. But what if your actions weren't weakness? What if they were loyalty, commitment, belief in someone's potential? That doesn't make you broken. It makes you rare. You didn't lose self-respect by loving them. You only lose it when you stop loving yourself after they're gone. Let that sink in. Sometimes people don't recognize the kind of heart they're holding. Not because you're unworthy, but because they're not capable, not mature enough, not emotionally ready, not brave enough to meet your depth with theirs, and that's not your fault. It's not your job to shrink to fit their capacity. You were never too much. You were just too real for someone who wasn't ready. Here's the paradox of love. The people with the deepest hearts often hurt the most, but they also live the most, feel the most, grow the most. The ones who avoid pain by avoiding love never know what it's like to connect on that level. But you lived it. You felt the highs and now you're feeling the lows. But that range of experience, That depth of emotional life, that's the soil where wisdom grows, that's where self-awareness is born, that's where true power is forged, and I know what you might be thinking right now, but if I loved so well, why wasn't it enough? That's a hard question. It eats at your confidence, but here's the truth. Love isn't always about enoughness. It's not a transaction where your emotional investment guarantees a return. People can leave even when they're loved deeply. People can hurt you even when they know you'd never hurt them. That doesn't reflect your value. It reflects their limitations. Stop thinking of your heartbreak as a consequence of being too loving. It's not. It's a consequence of loving someone who didn't know how to receive it, or protect it, or reciprocate it in a way that honored your heart. And that distinction matters more than you think. You need to remember who you were before they left. The way you smiled when you were around them, the way you believed in the relationship, the way you hoped, dreamed, gave, that wasn't desperation, that was someone alive, someone present in their own emotional truth. Someone who wanted more than a situationship, more than crumbs, more than emotional ambiguity. Don't let this heartbreak rewrite your narrative. You're not someone who loves too hard. You're someone who knows how to show up fully, and someday someone will meet you with the same energy, the same vulnerability, the same readiness. But for now, let this heartbreak be your mirror, not a mirror of failure, but a mirror of clarity. Look into it and see what you gave, see how deeply you cared, see how far you were willing to go to protect something you believed in. That's beautiful, that's strength in its rawest form. Let this also be the moment where you finally realize your love was never a mistake. Your presence in their life was never a burden, and your open heart was never something to regret. It was a gift, a powerful, honest, sacred gift, and maybe they didn't appreciate it. Maybe they even took advantage of it. But don't you dare let that make you bitter. Bitterness is how the heart closes. Resentment is how we lose the very thing that made us special in the first place. And you are not meant to be closed off. You are meant to be discerning, yes, but not detached, strong, but not cold, guarded, but never cynical. You can learn from this pain without letting it harden you. In fact, the strongest people aren't the ones who avoid love. They're the ones who keep loving after they've been hurt, who keep believing in connection even after disappointment, who keep giving, but now with wisdom, with boundaries, with awareness. Let this experience elevate your standard, not lower your spirit. Let it teach you what you will no longer accept. Let it guide you to deeper self-respect. But do not let it make you feel like your love was the problem. It wasn't. You just gave it to the wrong person. That happens, it hurts, but it's not the end, it's the middle. The part where you choose whether to close up or grow up. And you're choosing growth. So breathe, feel the pain, let it wash over you. And then remind yourself, the fact that you loved deeply is not what broke you. It's what will rebuild you, because from here on out, every decision you make, every person you let in, every boundary you hold firm, will come from a place of clarity, not desperation, from alignment, not fear, from a deeper understanding of what your heart truly deserves. And the next time you give that kind of love again, and you'll give it to someone who won't run from it. Someone who says, finally, I've been waiting for a heart like yours. Until then, honor what you gave, be proud of it. You were real, you were brave, you were love in its purest form, and that will always be your strength. When something breaks inside you, it feels like a collapse. Sudden, irreversible, terrifying. The pieces scatter in every direction. Your thoughts go silent 1 minute and scream the next. You question everything. Your choices, your worth, your instincts. But what if this moment, this breaking point isn't where you fell apart, but where you were finally exposed, not in a way that diminishes you, but in a way that shows you what was underneath all along? What if this pain isn't destroying you, but revealing you? There are moments in life that we think will kill us, not physically, emotionally, moments where something ends and it takes our sense of self with it. A breakup, a betrayal, the realization that what you were building with someone, was only ever real for you. You go to sleep next to someone who swore they'd always be there, and wake up alone in every possible sense. That's not just heartbreak, that's identity collapse. Because when you give someone access to the deepest rooms of your heart and they walk out, they don't just leave. They take pieces of the person you thought you were with them. And now here you are, sitting with the silence, asking yourself who you are without them, without the role you played, without the purpose they gave you, and it's disorienting, because the break doesn't just change your relationship status, it changes your perception of everything. You start seeing where you abandoned yourself while loving them, where you stopped asking for what you needed, where you twisted yourself to fit into the shape of their comfort, where you accepted less because you didn't want to lose what little you had. And in that raw, brutal truth, you begin to see something clearly for the first time. You didn't just love them, you gave parts of yourself away trying to keep them. Not intentionally, not foolishly, you did it the way people do when they believe love means sacrifice. You thought, if I give more, they'll give more. But the truth is, some people take everything and still leave. Not because you were unworthy, but because they didn't know how to carry the weight of your depth. So now the question becomes, what do you do with the pieces? Most people try to put themselves back together as fast as possible. To look okay, to sound okay, to act like the break didn't really touch them. But the ones who actually transform, the ones who rise out of heartbreak with power, are the ones who stop pretending. The ones who sit in the wreckage long enough to understand who they were before the pain, who they became during it, and who they now have the power to choose to be. Because here's the truth most people never tell you, heartbreak doesn't just happen to you. It shows you it's a mirror, a brutal, unflinching mirror that reflects every blind spot, every fear, every insecurity you tried to bury under the illusion of being okay. It's not just about the person who left, it's about everything you tolerated, ignored, or avoided while trying to hold on. And that is the most powerful gift hidden in the pain, awareness. Because once you see, you can't unsee. You can't go back to pretending that half love is enough. You can't go back to begging for scraps. You can't go back to shrinking yourself to fit into someone else's emotional limitations. When the break happens and you're forced to stop, really stop, you finally see who you were becoming, and sometimes that's the most painful part. Realizing you were losing yourself quietly, little by little, one compromise at a time, but now you're awake, and awakening hurts, because growth always does. When you're asleep in a relationship, it's easy to ignore the signs, easy to romanticize the potential, easy to justify why you're not happy, because at least you're not alone. But being awake means facing reality. It means facing the gap between what you hoped for and what you actually received. And more than that, it means facing the gap between who you are and who you've allowed yourself to become. You were never meant to stay in places where your voice was silenced, your needs dismissed, your spirit dimmed. But sometimes you stay anyway, because you're scared that letting go of them means letting go of love. You confuse love with attachment, you mistake comfort for compatibility, and you tell yourself it's not perfect, but nothing is. But when you're finally forced out of that space, when the break happens, you get the chance to confront the truth you kept avoiding. Love shouldn't hurt like that. You start to reclaim the parts of yourself you gave away. The confidence you lost trying to be enough. The joy you suppressed trying not to rock the boat. The boundaries you ignored to keep the peace. You see how long you were asleep, and how much of your life you spent waiting for someone else to give you the permission to be seen. But here's the beautiful part, you no longer need their permission. The break happened, it cracked the surface, and now everything beneath it is coming into view. The fear, the need for validation, the old wounds from childhood, the patterns that kept repeating in every relationship, the belief that your worth was tied to being chosen. You see it all, and it's overwhelming, but it's also liberating, because now you can choose differently. You can start asking the questions that actually matter. What do I want in love? What does healthy love look like to me? What values am I no longer willing to compromise? What boundaries need to be set not to punish others, but to protect my peace? The break didn't break you. It stripped away everything that wasn't really you to begin with. It peeled back the layers of performance, the people, pleasing, the fear-based attachment, and now what's left is raw. But it's real. You unedited, you unmasked. This version of you isn't fragile, it's grounded. Because now you know. Now you've seen the cost of abandoning yourself for someone else's love. And you'll never pay that price again. That's not bitterness, that's wisdom, that's not a wall, that's a foundation. You didn't fail, you evolved. You didn't lose love, you found clarity and the person you're becoming because of this pain. They're stronger, sharper, more self-aware, more intentional, and more aligned with the kind of love that actually honors who you are. So let the break be what it is, a portal, a painful, necessary portal from the person you were pretending to be to the person you were always meant to become. This is not the end of your story. This is the chapter where everything changes, where you stop asking, why didn't they love me, and start asking, why did I keep loving someone who didn't know how to love me? That's a shift. That's power, because now you no longer need closure from them. You're giving yourself clarity. You no longer need them to explain why they left. You understand why it needed to end. You no longer fantasize about the relationship you had. You grieve what you hoped for, but you no longer settle for pretending it was healthy. You've outgrown the version of yourself that begged for love. You're stepping into the version that knows love should never require you to betray yourself. And the next time love comes along, and it will, you'll bring this awareness with you. You'll show up with a heart that's open, but no longer desperate, compassionate, but not naive, kind, but no longer willing to be walked over. You'll see red flags and act on them. You'll know the difference between chemistry and compatibility, between love and emotional chaos. This pain, this heartbreak, is not your undoing, it's your unveiling. You are not what was broken, you are what's emerging, so don't rush it. Let the process do its work. Let the grief humble you, let the lessons shape you, let the clarity build you, because when you rise from this, and you will, you won't just be the same person standing again. You'll be someone entirely new, someone rebuilt from truth, not illusion, from self-respect, not fear, from love, not lack, and that version of you, that version is unstoppable. There comes a moment, often deep into the quiet of heartbreak, where everything just stops. The noise, the questions, the ache, all of it, not because the pain is gone, but because your soul gets tired of fighting. You've replayed the memories enough times to memorize every facial expression, every word left hanging in the air, every almost that could have changed the ending. You've asked the same questions over and over. Why did it end? Why did they stop trying? Why did I give so much? Why wasn't it enough? And still, there are no real answers, only silence, only space, and then something shifts. Not all at once. It's not a thunderous cinematic transformation. It's small, subtle, but it's real. It's when you look in the mirror and notice that despite the sadness, you're still standing. Despite the tears you cried last night, you still woke up. Despite your heart screaming that it's shattered, your feet still moved. You got up, you showed up, you kept going, and that right there is where your power begins to show. Because maybe you thought this heartbreak would break you, and maybe it did in some ways. But what's left standing is something stronger than even you expected. Your will to heal, your will to grow, your will to rebuild. Even when nothing makes sense, even when the future feels like a blur and the past feels like a trap, there's something inside you that says, I'm not done yet. That voice might be quiet, shaky, inconsistent, but it's still there and it's stronger than your wound. Pain is not weakness. Pain is proof that you felt something deeply, that you cared, that you tried. And the fact that you're still moving forward, even with that pain stitched into your chest, is a form of strength that most people will never see or understand. You're not walking away untouched. You're walking away marked. But those marks, they're not scars of failure. They're reminders that you lived through something and you're still here. It's easy to mistake pain for defeat. It's easy to believe that just because you feel broken, you are broken. But brokenness is not the same as being finished. It's not the end. It's the fire that reveals what was hiding inside you all along, and the deeper the pain, the more powerful the truth that follows. Because the truth is, your strength was never about not falling. It's about what you do after. There's this moment in the healing process, after the begging stops, after the anger fades, after you've exhausted every emotional resource trying to make sense of what happened, where you start to notice you're still breathing. You're still functioning, and not just functioning. You're slowly learning how to live with more self-respect, more awareness, more intention. That's what the pain is doing. It's chiseling away the illusions you used to hold. The idea that you needed them to feel worthy, the belief that their love defined your value, the lie that losing them meant losing your future. The pain is cleaning out the spaces you filled with fantasies and assumptions and denial. It's forcing you to stand in the truth of what actually was, not what you wished it to be, and truth, no matter how painful, is the birthplace of power, because you can't change what you're not willing to face. You can't grow out of something you won't acknowledge, but once you do, once you really see it, then your will starts to lead the way, not your emotions, not your nostalgia. Your will, the part of you that's decided, this will not be the thing that defines me. There is something sacred about the moment you stop seeking closure from them and start creating peace within yourself. The moment you stop trying to prove your worth to someone who walked away and start proving your worth to yourself in everything you choose moving forward. That's when healing becomes a choice, not a reaction. That's when you stop simply surviving the heartbreak and start transforming because of it. You begin to see the strength you didn't know you had when you were pouring your energy into someone who couldn't meet you there. You begin to rebuild your standards, not from anger, but from clarity, not from bitterness, but from truth. You start to understand that the only validation that truly matters is the one that comes from you. And that realization, that's the beginning of your freedom. Every time you say no to someone who reminds you of the past pattern, your will is growing. Every time you choose silence over chasing, your will gets louder. Every time you turn towards self-respect instead of self-sacrifice, your will strengthens, and eventually your will starts writing the script of your life. Not your wounds, not your fears, not your doubts. You become the kind of person who doesn't need to be saved because you learned how to rescue yourself. The kind of person who knows they can be shattered and still find the strength to stand taller than they did before. The kind of person who looks in the mirror and says, I went through hell, and I still chose love, but this time I'll make sure that love includes me. This is where real transformation happens, not when you forget them. Not when the pain completely disappears, but when you stop negotiating your worth based on who stayed or who left. When you stop rewriting your personality to fit into someone else's life. When you stop watering down your truth to make someone else comfortable. Your will is the voice that reminds you in your darkest moments that you deserve more than breadcrumbs, that you are not meant to be anyone's option, that your presence is not a favor, it's a gift, a rare, valuable gift. And if someone couldn't see that, it's not your job to keep proving it. It's your job to keep walking, and maybe that walk is lonely at first. Maybe it's filled with second guessing. Maybe it feels like no one understands what you're carrying. But one step after another, you build momentum, and that momentum is called self-respect. It's called awareness. It's called healing, and it's slow, sometimes painfully slow, but it's steady, and it's real. Because unlike the fleeting high of romantic validation, this kind of strength doesn't vanish when someone walks away. It doesn't crumble when you're alone. It doesn't rely on anyone else's approval. It comes from the choice every single day to keep choosing you, to show up for yourself the way you once showed up for them. You learn to take all that energy you poured into someone else and redirect it into yourself. Into your dreams, your passions, your growth. You turn the page, not because it didn't matter, but because you matter more. You learn that healing isn't just about letting go of the past, it's about reaching for a future that aligns with your soul. And one day, without even realizing it, you stop aching the way you used to. You stop waking up wondering if they'll text. You stop checking their profile. You stop replaying the last conversation. You stop asking what you could have done differently. Because your mind has finally caught up with what your will has known all along. They were not your ending. They were a detour, a necessary one, a painful one, but still a detour. You took a path that showed you everything you don't want. Everything you no longer need to chase, everything you're finally free to release, and now the road ahead is yours. You walk it wiser, you walk it slower, but you walk it with intention. You don't need someone to complete you. You need someone to walk beside you without dimming your light, and if they can't do that, you'd rather walk alone, because you finally know being alone is not the same as being empty. Your heart isn't empty. It's just healing. Your spirit isn't broken. It's just rebuilding, and your life isn't over. It's just beginning. So if you're standing in the aftermath of heartbreak right now, if the nights feel long and the pain still feels fresh, remember this. The wound is deep, yes. But your will is deeper. You can carry sadness and still move forward. You can miss them and still choose peace. You can feel lost and still trust the path. You're not behind, you're not broken, you're not unloved. You are becoming, and the version of you that comes out of this, they will be unstoppable. Not because they don't feel pain anymore, but because they no longer let pain make their decisions for them. That's the real power of heartbreak. It doesn't just show you what hurts, it shows you what matters. It teaches you what you'll never settle for again, and it introduces you to the version of you who chooses strength over fear, clarity over chaos, and peace over the performance of love. That is the will that got you out of bed today. That is the will that's been fighting for you in the background. That is the will that will carry you forward when everything else tells you to give up. And that is stronger than anything that ever tried to break you. A broken heart isn't a curse, it's a signal, a sign that you had the courage to care, and now the courage to change, so hold your head high. Not because it didn't hurt, but because you survived what was meant to break you, and came back with a stronger will. You're not the heartbreak, you're the healing.